I would like to begin by welcoming all who are here to honor the memory of Stu Staton, all those gathered in the sanctuary, but also to recognize there are many family, friends, members of the congregation, the community, the school community who are joining us via live streaming on this occasion, because we are still dealing with the guidelines set out by the provincial government. And as Stu's most recent minister, I want to say that he was a delightful person to visit with. I got to know Stu over the past 4 years, visiting him at Adelaide Place before COVID. He was certainly a character, and I say that in the best sense of the word. Always enjoyed his visits. So in the face of death, we gather together to remember Stuart Staton and to give thanks for his life and love. And we open our hearts to each other, offering the complexity of our feelings as we seek understanding and healing. We come to this place to hear God's word, which comforts and sustains us, and to express our care and concern to the family as they commit their loved one to the care of the living God. And the words of invocation are taken from Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From whence does my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. God will not let your foot be moved, neither will the Lord slumber. Behold, the one who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper, and the shade on your right hand. The sun shall not smite you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil and watch over your life. The Lord will keep your going out and coming in forevermore. And let us bow our hearts and minds in prayer. When someone we love dies, we feel the pain of separation. No one will ever call out from within us quite the same responses, actions, or ideas. As we look back over the life of Stu Staton, we are reminded that being together in community brings both comfort and pain, sadness and joy. And our being parted from him reminds us of the reality of human frailty and God's enduring grace. We are thankful, O God, that your love draws us together and gives us a new appreciation for one another and reminds us of the beauty of human relationships, which mirror your goodness and grace to us. Amen. And it was a privilege to meet with the family to plan for the service today. It was very well thought out. It was designed to be very personal. Stu loved music. He loved the organ, and the family chose the hymns today to be sung. So I'm going to invite you, as you are able, to please stand, and we will sing together, Abide with Me. The words will be on the screens at the front of the church.
Thank you.
Please be seated. Later on in the service, we will be reading together an affirmation of faith of the United Church of Canada, a new creed, and one of the lines in it really follows on the last line of that beautiful hymn, "Abide with me," when we say in life, in death, and in life beyond death, God is with us. We are not alone. Thanks be to God. Listen to the words of the psalmist. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. And thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. And surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." And also words from Ecclesiastes, a book of wisdom. "For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pick up what is planted. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time of war, and a time of peace. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek, and a time to lose. A time to rend, and a time to sow. A time to keep silent, and a time to speak. God has made everything beautiful in its time, and God has placed eternity in the hearts of humanity." And let us join our hearts once more for prayer. God of all mystery, in the presence of death, give us grace to wait on you with patience and trust. You are nearer to us than we know, closer than we can imagine. If we cannot find you, it is because we search in far places. Before we felt the pain of loss, you experienced it. Before the burden came upon us, you carried it. Before the sorrow weighed heavy on our hearts, you felt it. As you walk in the valley of every dark shadow, be our good shepherd and sustain us to walk with you, lest in the weakness of the moment we stumble and fall. Though the pain is real and the heartache deepens, keep us in your way and guide us past every danger through Jesus Christ, our Savior and Lord. Amen. And at this time, we are going to have Shannon McCracken and her father, Erwin, our director of music, lead us in What a Wonderful Life. And Shannon was just telling me before the service how Stu was such a strong supporter of her, going out of his way and traveling to support her. I didn't know if you might want to say that, but I just thought it would be good for everybody to know Shannon. So the family said for the service today, they were really wanting Shannon to sing, and I think I heard through the family that you possibly also sang at Marion's funeral a number of years ago. So I'm so glad you can be with us today.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright, blessed day, the dark, sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, "How do you do?" They're really saying, "I love you." I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Very fitting song to sing for Stu because he certainly possessed a positive outlook on life. I think he would just echo those words, what a wonderful world. So today there is by no way we can sum up everything that Stu meant to each and every one of you. Because you who are gathered here today are a living, breathing eulogy and testimony to his life. Your thoughts of him and your feelings for him and your memories of him all convey far more than just a mere record of the events of his life could ever possibly say. But it is fitting that we do pause and remember a life well lived. So as the people come forward today, I would just invite you to join in the stories about Stu, and each of you remember him in your own special way. And I would like to begin by calling Joanne Wright forward. And please introduce yourself so everybody will know who you are. Well, I said Joanne Wright, but who you may be representing.
So do I have a long time? Should I start when I was, 2 or 3? Hi, I'm Joanne Wright, and I worked with the Arthritis Society for about 20 years. And during that time, I worked with Stu on many, many occasions, and he and I probably worked together for, a good 10 or 15 years. Anyway, I was the liaison person between the Arthritis Society and the Ontario Lupus Association. I've worked with many volunteers, and to be honest, not all are great. I've worked with people who have been very easygoing, and then people who have not been as easygoing as you would like. But Stu, he was a truly nice person that made others feel valued, which is why I felt compelled to share my story about how he affected others. Every Tuesday morning, Stu would come into my office, always bright and cheery. We would sit for an hour or so talking business, but mostly talking about what was going on in our lives. He was so supportive when my dad passed away, and in one sense took on the role of father, offering me guidance and advice. Stu always had lots of time to spend talking, but more importantly, listening. He was a favorite volunteer among our staff in our organization. He always appeared to be the happy-go-lucky guy with his wonderfully contagious smile. But he also knew when to sit down and get serious. I remember during a time of budget cuts, he learned that one of our secretarial staff was being let go 8 months into her pregnancy. Stu was appalled with what was about to happen and decided to have a chat with our executive director. His strong sense of right and wrong clearly prevailed, because while I wasn't at the meeting, let's just say he got the job done. The woman kept her job. In reading Stu's obituary, I saw that he and his wife Marion were awarded the Canada Volunteer Award for their dedication and commitment to others. I can think of no other couple that did so much for the arthritis community. They were truly a delightful and caring couple. When I was pregnant with my first child and I had a meeting in Lindsay, I went to their house for dinner beforehand, and bless Marion, she saw how tired I looked and insisted I have a lie down before our meeting. I think she even gave me one of her crocheted, wraps. Anyway, they were both thoughtful and compassionate, the kind of people you want to have as friends. You meet many dedicated people in the charitable business and a few who really stand out. Stu is that kind of man. He will be sorely missed, but I'm sure he's already serving his community up there. Go get him, Stu. Now, they've asked me, because I'm with the Arthritis Society, to read some comments from number one, Honey Ager, who was the founder and first president of the Ontario Lupus Association. Back in the 70s, Marion Staton and I started our friendship on the 6th floor of Wellesley Hospital, a place we both spent far too much time in as patients. Of course, Marion's caring husband, Stu, became a dear friend and a beacon of light in my life. Actually, without Stu, I truly believe that the Ontario Lupus Association would never have fully come into existence. With Marion and I both frustrated by the lack of information, education, and understanding of lupus by both the medical community and patients themselves, it was Stu that had the passion and drive to fulfill our aspirations to help create an organization to represent lupus patients. Stu brought a special insight to the OLA. He assisted the life partners of those who suffered from the disease, the men and women most overlooked. His work with lupus teens is well documented. He had such a passion and the skill to put our requests and demands into action while we as lupus patients tried to manage our disease. I will miss my friend Stu, not only for his passion for advocacy, but his happy demeanor and his ability to listen to my thoughts and dreams, no matter if they were scrambled or not, and responded with great ideas and solutions. Stu Staton has left a legacy to build on for our future generation. I will miss you, my friend. And from Francis Gotkin, who was the second president of the OLA. We met Stu and Marion Staton at the first meeting of lupus at Wellesley and Princess Margaret Hospitals in April '78. It was a fun and great working relationship that we, my husband Jerry and myself, had with both Marion and Stu. Stu was instrumental with his input in our first conference in 1983. From there on, he was my go-to person with the help of surveys and anything I could think of when I was the president of the OLA from '83 to '87. Stu could also relate to men with lupus who were often left behind. Stu always had a twinkle in his eye, I'm sure you all agree, and a good humor, smart, except for one thing. When he retired from teaching, he asked for an electric typewriter instead of a computer. It was a joke between us because I couldn't get the hang of a computer. However, I could also type. Usually we wrote or spoke to each other on the phone. As I look back, I realized that whenever Stu came in from Lindsay to the office, I was there to micromanage. And for those of you who know and love Frances, she knew how to micromanage, let me tell you. Forgive me, Stu. However, we really did love each other. Sorry, Martha and Peter. Goodbye, my friend, till we see you again. And my last is from Andrea Ohingwan, who was the founder of the Teen Support Lupus Group. Consider yourself blessed if you've had a chance to know Stu. His jovial persona and welcoming nature actually made it difficult to not know him. My lupus journey began just a few years before meeting Stu in the early 1990s. The encounter was meant to be, as he was the perfect connection for me to get my idea of a support group for teens with lupus off the ground. A genuine teacher to the core, Stu was keen to support young people achieve their goals inside and outside of the classroom. He became family, a definite key member of my lupus family that was made up of other patients, families, and others that make up a patient's special support team. He was a model teacher for me. I took traits and characteristics of his style to use in my own teaching practice. Fun, funny, and super helpful reference for nuggets of wisdom for navigating the lupus world, the education field, and the educational field. But most importantly of all, he was simply unique Stu, loving angel to Marion, and so many others who were fortunate to cross his path. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Joanne. And I know the family really appreciates the fact that you not only shared your own reflections upon Stu, but read some of the emails and postings they had received, people wanting to be remembered on this day because of their close connection to Stu. And he really did make an impact in the wider community, that's for sure. So we're going to hear some more things and some very personal things. At this time, I'm going to call forward his granddaughter, Anna. I even know in the most current directory of Cambridge Street United Church, with Stu, there is Anna in that picture, sitting right along with him. So it's just so appropriate that she will be sharing today. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I want to take this time to talk about my grandpa, share some memories I have. Please bear with me. I will try to make it through this without too many tears. Now, in proper grandpa fashion, I have countless amounts of stories that I could share with you today, but I promise not to go on for too long. To the people that know me well, will know that my grandpa and I shared a very special bond. He told me from the moment I was born, he knew we were going to be best friends. He would recall holding me, a newborn, walking up and down the halls of the hospital, talking about life and all the things that were ahead of me, all the adventures and the things he was excited to share and experience with me. While he was talking to me, he recalled feeling two little hands pushing against his chest, looking up at him in wonder, and that's when he knew. Early memories of my grandpa would include things like Santa Claus, his hot porridge that was always just right, fall walks in the forest, Tim's after school every Monday, week-long camping trips, long drives with lunch afterwards, and of course, his Sunday school sermons. When I was younger, my grandpa was always that positive, strong male presence that I looked up to and admired. He and my nanny were a very crucial part to my upbringing right from the beginning. He was always the grandparent that I would go to for tough love, the reality of life. And Nanny was my shopping companion, with laughter-filled jokes and funny stories. He was the one that would tell me meaningful things and stories from his childhood that I still think about to this day. He'd give me insightful sayings that his mother would say to him. At the time, I didn't fully understand what they had meant, and he simply said to me, "One day you will." Those things included treat others the way you want to be treated. If you ever need help, just ask. Don't be afraid to ask because you'll never know that way. Grandpa and I shared many adventures together. From the time I was 5, we started to go camping, and we kept camping up until I was about 10, and that put him to about 76. And we used to sleep on a foam roll in a tent on the ground. For 3 of those years, he eventually broke down and bought a slightly bigger tent with a blow-up air mattress. But near the end, it was getting harder for him to get on and off the ground. This is when Nanny stepped in and put her foot down, and road tripping became our summerly tradition. Only this time, Nanny would be included. I remember when they asked me to go. It was over lunch at Eganridge, and he said, "Did you want to go see the East Coast with us this summer?" I said, "Yes, I do." From there on out, after all of our trips, he'd ask, "Well, should we go see Newfoundland next summer? Should we go see the West Coast next summer? Should we finish Canada next summer?" I'm so grateful to have memories like these, to have shared such adventures with my grandparents. It's something I'll never take for granted. Unfortunately, we as a trio never finished Canada fully. After Nanny passed, Grandpa and I found ourselves in a weird situation. We didn't have much to talk about. We had always had a good relationship, but Nanny wasn't there to tie us together anymore. We were given an opportunity to get to know one another as friends, not just a grandparent-grandchild relationship, which we had already had, but to build on top of that into something stronger. Being older and coming into adulthood, we talked about life, and I asked him deeper questions with my new perspective on the world. We would strike up heated debates about life, me challenging him, and he challenging me. Fortunately, I was able to go with Grandpa on his last great road trip to the Yukon, also known as the last road trip we would take that would conclude our whole Canadian adventure. Oddly enough, the year we went, Yukon Tourism's travel guide marketing was called the last great road trip. It was very fitting, and we saw it as a sign of meant to be. It was the best trip that I've been on. Not that the others weren't incredible, but it was different. I was an adult, and Grandpa was now one of my best friends. The memory that will always stand out from that trip is the first night we were in Dawson City. The travel guide provided a checklist of things you should do when you go to the Yukon. We had checked off almost all of them, and only 2 were left. We were staying in the downtown hotel, which is where they serve their infamous sour toe cocktail. It's the one where you have the shot of alcohol and they put this very old toe in it, and you have to take a shot of it, and the rule is it has to touch your lips. Afterwards, we went over to the Lookout, which overlooked all of Dawson City and all of northern Yukon. We felt like we were on top of the world, where we checked off our last to-do, which was dancing under the midnight sun on top of the world. To end this, I just want to end with a story that just embodied who my grandpa was. And Grandpa was always the type of person that saw the good in the world and saw the good in people. One day, in the late 90s, early 2000s, a young girl knocked on the front door of my grandparents' house. When my grandpa answered, desperate, she asked him for some money. She told her story, and he obliged to give her what he had in his wallet. But he had told her that this was a one-time only. She agreed and went on her way. When my mom found out, she had told them that they should be more careful and not to do things like that. But Grandpa believed this woman, and he didn't feel any kind of threat from her. He just knew she needed help. Grandpa believed. He used to say to me, "Would you rather be 90% right or 90% wrong?" Well, obviously I want to be right. And he told me, "Well, then trust everyone." In the type of world we live in now, it's difficult to believe in the goodness of people, and I've been told by others that the world is a broken place. And yes, it's easy to see the bad and believe it, but it's the words and actions, the trust in my grandpa's heart, that still makes me believe otherwise. And I will always hold that same compassion in my heart for others like he did. My grandpa was one of the most important people to me. I will treasure all the times we spent together, and all the wisdom he's given to me over the years. He was a teacher, Santa Claus, and Grandpa, but overall just an amazing man. I'll love you forever, Grandpa, and thank you.
So many beautiful memories you shared on. I can see you had such a close bond and relationship with your grandpa, and it surely came through. You spoke right from your heart. At this time, I'm going to call forward Bev Staten. She would also like to share some of her thoughts and memories too.
My goodness, I have to follow that. Ooh. Long time ago, when my mom passed away, I wrote a piece. I went downstairs and wrote a piece because I had to get thoughts down. And then shortly after she died, one of my favorite puppies died, and I did the same thing. And then Peter and I lost a very important bird, and I did the same thing. And then with my dad and with Marion, I've found that going to the typewriter and putting down words, I find them kind of comforting. So this is what I found for Stu. And it is a pleasure for me to talk to you today about Stu and to celebrate his life. About 13 years ago, we were here celebrating Stu's 80th birthday. Peter and Anna performed. Okay? Peter played keyboard and sang harmonies, and Anna sang. And the lyric begins, "Grandpa, tell me about the good old days." Okay, well, when Peter brought me home to meet the folks, it didn't take me long to realize that this was extremely appropriate for this man, because Stu was indeed a storyteller. Okay? There's an affinity between people with similar occupations, and because we've both taught and coached, it was easy for Stu and I to connect. And we talked about students. We talked about the good ones, the bad ones, the excellent ones, the mediocre ones, the struggling ones. And through all of this, it sort of bonded us. Okay. I found in my mind, I imagined Stu sitting on the corner of his desk, regaling with all of his stories and his tales, and somehow these tales magically connected to his lessons. Okay, there's this story of Stu having to teach typing one year, and he had no idea how to type, but he got in there and he managed to teach typing. I don't know how many times you can interrupt your typing class with stories, but he also taught or coached basketball, so I did indeed imagine basketball practice as being kind of broken down at times. Someone would do something wrong and you'd have to pull him aside and give him some kind of tale that would console him. Our holiday visits didn't provide a lot of opportunity for me to get to know Stu and Marion that much, because we would show up at Christmas, New Year's, sometimes because it was around his birthday. We would be there in the summer, and we would be there for Thanksgiving. So we didn't get to know each other a lot, but on one of our holiday visits, when everyone was napping, and I get a little antsy, I don't like sitting still for too long, I headed out and decided to make a snowman. And before I even got the base of the snowman rolled up, Stu was out there helping me. And he's rolling up the snowman, and we put this frosty guy together in a matter of zero minutes, and he ran in and got a carrot, and it was a fun experience. And this is one of the ways I think of Stu, that he really enjoyed being active. He enjoyed cross-country skiing. He enjoyed the walks in the forest. He enjoyed picking blueberries and making homemade jam. So all of these activities made him fun-loving. And he had a remarkable list of friends that I'm sure were the source of many of his entertaining stories, one of which included parking his car sideways in the garage, a single-car garage. So just lots of fun. Not all of his anecdotes were philosophical. Okay. Also, right here in this building for about 40 years, as many of you know, Stu had taught Sunday school. And I imagined his biblical information being sprinkled with anecdotes, stories, tales that would somehow provide some moral value. And, with high school, attendance is mandatory. It's kind of like what kind of audience? A captive audience. Thank you. I needed that, Ken. They're a captive audience in high school, but in Sunday school, it is voluntary, correct? And for teens to be returning week after week, they must have been entertained, they must have been engaged, there must have been some connection that Stu magically had that brought these kids back with regularity, okay? Turning on some light bulbs. I could tell you in terms of his teaching, just about a month ago, without her even knowing that Stu was ailing, one of his students contacted Peter, trying to find him. And I'm sure if one of my students tried to find me 10 years from now, I'd be really honored. So I found that extremely significant. Stu's final teaching assignment was a result of Anna going to daycare. And I'm sure he attended regularly, probably to make sure she was handled with kid gloves there. But he found out how important a substitute grandparent could be. And he stayed on for another 20 years as a substitute grandparent. He told me about the day he showed a 3-year-old that he could take his teeth out. And and I guess she didn't sit on his knee for about a month, but he did have that story to pass on to me. Okay. Martha forwarded a list, and Ms. Wright from the Lupus has given you an idea of all of the volunteer activities that Stu was involved in his life. His award for the government for his work with arthritis and lupus, and the Academy Theatre here in London, in Lindsay, that he was involved with. He was always eager to help others. I remember yellow plastic ducks in his backyard that we counted for the duck derby and things like that. So, we're also very much aware of his role as a caretaker for Marion. He often had the story, well, I've always been a caretaker because when I was in high school, I had to go and live with my grandparents, and my grandparents were ill. I learned to be a caretaker from a very young boy. And he's carried on sort of as a caretaker, trying to help people and being involved. My holiday visits didn't provide me with the opportunity to see all of these large achievements, though. But I'm going to share a small story to give you sort of my opinion on Stu. Peter and I had an anniversary party at our home, and the Blue Jays had a day off, and we go to a Blue Jays game wherever they play, and it was a day off, so we decided to celebrate our anniversary at our place. Mary and Stu came, Martha came. Were you there, Anna? I think you were, yep. And Marion and Stu stayed an extra day because Marion wanted to go for a swim, and she didn't want to go for a swim with a crowd around because she was a long way from the bathing beauty stage of her life at this point. Stu and Mo were walking towards the pool. Stu, as usual, was supporting her on the way to the pool steps, and they were basically on their own. I was a distant observer, sort of at the other end of the pool, and I watched Stu bend over and brush this tiny little kiss on her forehead. And that kind of gave me a little spark. Yep. We all know he's one of the most honorable guys, supporting Marion through her illness and her broken bones through all of those years. But to romantic me, this gentle little kiss emphasized the strength of his love, and where the smallest gifts are even sometimes the most important. Okay. So now we do not have Stu with us to tell us about the good old days, and we should have written these tales down because they probably would have been a good bestseller, but we do have memories that can bring a chuckle absolutely out of nowhere. So aren't we lucky to have known this man whose memory brings a smile? Thanks. Now I can go and cry.
Thank you so much, Bev, for also sharing all of those wonderful memories, and I'm glad you sat down. I don't know if you really used a typewriter, or you did use a typewriter? Wow. I've heard about typewriters here today. This is pretty awesome. You don't hear about that much anymore, so I'm very impressed. So, Peter, you sort of have the unenviable job of following up all of these wonderful tributes, but as yeah, take away all your stuff and material, but no better way to end than to call you forward to share about your father.
Is this on? Hello. Thank you for being here today. Peter, I want to mention that Stu, my dad, has already been cremated and is present with us in the very same urn as Marion, my mom. And if we just listen, you can hear her say, "Stu, move over, you're crowding me." I am going to share just my memories out of mostly when I was very young, and try to relate them in a fun way to make this a celebration, a happy time. I say what I did. I would have been, Martha, you weren't around yet. I would have woken myself up in the middle of the night, walked into the kitchen, reached up, pulled out a big spoon, sat down, pulled out nice big tin of rich, mellow, creamy peanut butter, stuck it down between my legs, pulled off, and started. Dad must have heard me eventually. He came out. He only said, "Come on, Sam, let's go to bed." He was out of peanut butter, but that's all he said. I don't know how many times I had peanut butter, but I do remember that was a special time. He's been given God-given gifts. We've heard about this benevolence, his patience, his generosity, and the like. But when we consider Dad, or Stu, his greatest gift would have to be the gift of, say it with me, gab. We would have family functions with friends, and great chef, great cook, great meals. And for whatever reason, Bev was not the last person to finish her meal when Dad was there, because the gift of gab prevented him from ever really getting down to eating. He would start talking while we're having a good meal, and he would talk, and he would talk, and he would talk, and he says, oh, well, maybe I should have some of them when I get the dessert. But he just, I'll never forget that. I'm not going to segue very well right now. Anna, you did a fantastic job, and Bev, I'm so pleased. It was just, thanks. Family reunions. There's state and family reunion we had every June. I can't remember which Saturday it was, but early on before I was playing every Saturday, I went, and Dad was given the task of putting the games together for the family. And you get the three-legged race, the sack race, the egg toss, the balloon toss. He had all those, but he was so excited. He came up with his own particular game, contest, event. And he was just giddy, thinking of how well this is going to go. This is going to be fantastic. Just wait, it's going to be great, 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 great. Well, that contest was, and he stood up and he said, okay, just the gentlemen, come on up here. You're going to get a needle and you're going to get a thread, and the first one to put the thread through the needle will win. Peg, I don't know whether you remember this, and I don't know who it was, but he was just beside himself. Oh, yeah. And it might have been Cousin Bob. I'm not sure who it was, but it went, okay, ready, go. Now what? He was quite distraught, but he moved on. Next thing I guess I want to tell you about is the sibling rivalry. I don't know that we really had a strong sibling rivalry, except I'm not sure I wasn't coveting the idea of when I was really little, that I would be able to stand up in the front seat of the car while he was driving. And then when he took a hard left turn, you fell over, opened the door, it went flying out onto the road. I missed that. So heads up to you, well done. But in the sibling rivalry, one generation later, this is the one. And you've already touched on it, and this is why I'm going to get a little clamped right now. But how did I wrote this down there. I lost my spot. Just envy. Your trip to Yukon, they don't like the or Yukon territories anymore, I learned that, was something that I envied so much. You got to be one-on-one with my dad. And I was thinking about it and went, wait a minute. I did some one-on-ones a couple of times, 3 times, 4 times maybe. And I was remembering back, it wasn't quite that way, but we went to Expo 67 together and had a great time. The one memory I had best was being in the Bell Pavilion, holding on to but we weren't moving, but we would. We went like this. But then I realized it wasn't exactly one-on-one, because with him was a busload of Fenton Falls High School kids that he was chaperoning. But for an 11-year-old, it felt like it was just one-on-one. And then a few years later, it was the summer of '72, where he got the idea. I lost them. Got the idea of building a cottage and selling it. There it is. So I was hired for no pay, just spend the time with my dad, and every day for the summer, except when the Kinsman Band went to Edmonton for Klondike Days. We got to build this cottage, but wait, it wasn't just the two of us. Mr. Doug Murray was there. He made it work. And thank you, Doug. It's still standing, I trust. It's still standing, I trust. And the center beam was just a little off, right? Just a little off. It was just a little off. It'll be fine. And thirdly, I think I've got this. much later, I was actually in London on my own, and it was the summer of '81. We watched Charles and Diana's wedding, and we got to go to the Ride Out, which is a local beer joint, to get dinner for $2 each, which was really, really good. And we spent some times together, although I did have to share the house with 4 others, so that was not quite perfect. And in his traveling, we did, the band I was in was playing in a new spot in Dublin, which is up, I don't know if you've heard of Dublin, but it's north of London, about 70 kilometers, 80 kilometers. And Dad said, well, I'd like to come and hear you. So I said, sure, we haven't been there before, don't know what it's like. But we arrived up. You may never have heard this in this place. And I went to the front door and I was greeted by this gentleman who was wearing a top hat, a bow tie, slippers, and nothing else. And he just walked, come on, you're the band, let's go, let's go. So apparently he was working that place all week long. We had no idea, and Dad was part of it, and he would talk about it later. So that was kind of fun. Now, remembering him in the last 4 years is something that's going to be very difficult. These are back in the heyday, the great days. And those are the memories I'm going to try to remember. And seeing him on Father's Day this year, I hadn't seen him since before the pandemic. The lips aren't working, pandemic. If he were walking in the front, downtown Toronto, and I was downtown Toronto walking past, I would not know it was him when I saw him on Father's Day. And we both thought, though, he looked a lot like our uncle. Too bad it wasn't from the same family, though. And anyway, I'm going to try to probably repress those memories a little bit and just remember all the good things from the past. And speaking of which, this is my best segue, by the way. We talked about him at Fenland Falls being a teacher and a coach, and he fell in love with basketball. So he volunteered to coach his basketball team. Just so happens that I was at LCVI here in Lindsay, and then this one day, we were traveling to Fenland Falls to play. Dad was coaching the other team. It was back in the early 70s, and the uniforms were standard, but your socks, you could wear whatever you wanted. So, being at that time, I decided that I had found a pair of socks that were just perfect. They were nice, neon, lilac, purple. And we did well when I had those socks on. And so we get up to Fenland, and I open up my bag. I'm looking, there's this, there's that. And I went, uh-oh, guys, I don't have my lucky socks. And I looked down at what I was wearing. Turns out I was wearing fuzzy, hot pink socks. I decided, what do you think? Should I? And they said, yeah, go for it. So a little community of Fenland Falls, maybe 600 people, hadn't seen these socks, and they probably wouldn't have seen them for another 10, 15 years, because that's how things progressed. And I'm out there on the court warming up, and I can hear at the stands, and we're playing the game. The calls are going against myself and my team. Things are not looking good. My father is over there on the other bench, watching everything go on. I'm in my head, I'm just going crazy. There's a foul, and we're at the line, and I'm in my defensive spot. The ball goes up, it hits the rim and is bouncing up, and I leap. I can't, the suit's not gonna let me do it, but I leap up and I'm about a foot above the rim and grab the ball. And then I realized that was just the first shot. So down I come, I hand the ball off to the ref, and I'm feeling absolutely just nuts. So what's Dad thinking at this point? We finished the game. I'm so upset. I had my 4th foul, and I said, this is it. I'm on a defensive stance. Their big guy was dribbling up the court, and I don't know if how many of you are going to remember this, but I gave my very best Bobby Bond hip check, and he went flying about from here to over there. I raised my hand. That was my 5th foul, and off I went. What did Dad remember about this? What would you remember about this? There's your son out there doing these things in your place. Well, I got home. I didn't hear anything from him. Not a word. Did I mention patience and generosity? And it was about 10 years ago I braved myself to remind him of that day. And what did he say? No, I don't remember. Thanks, Dad. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you.
I'm just glad you did remember all of those fun stories. Put a smile on our faces. I'm just glad you wore the pink fuzzy socks and not the same outfit that that innkeeper was wearing up in Dublin when you showed up for the game. Your dad was indeed a very, very special, unique, and wonderful person. And we're going to miss him so dearly. We're going to show a video presentation of Going Up Yonder, performed by the Voices of Victory Youth Choir. And as a family, when we gathered to plan the service, we desperately were looking for a version of this piece done by the Cambridge Street young people at, I believe it was the All Saints Cathedral in New York. St. John Divine, thanks, Angelique. That was before my arrival here. But a beautiful cathedral, and Anna was singing it there. Unfortunately, we couldn't put our fingers on that version, but we did find one, and it is with our young people's choir, Voices of Victory, and which Anna and Shannon sang in for many years. So again, we're just going to play this special piece of music, and as we do, just enjoy and remember Stu in your own special way. And knowing how important young people were to Stu, even though we can't have the young people present with us today, it just seems appropriate that we could have that clip and feel like the young people were with us today for his service. Let us bow our hearts and minds in prayer. Creator God, from whom we come and to whom we go, we lift up our hearts seeking comfort and courage. And we pray for Stu's family and all whom they consider to be part of their larger family through friendship, love, and marriage. And we think of those who cannot be with us today and those who have gone before him, especially his wife, Marion. But we say in faith that they have been reunited in that place which you have prepared for them from the beginning of time. And when we consider the sands of eternity, we realize we will all be together again in just a twinkling of an eye. And when we consider this life and the next, we know the bridge between the two is love. For love is the only explanation. The Apostle Paul wrote to the Christians gathered in Corinth 2,000 years ago that there are three things that remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. So it is into your loving and eternal care that we commit Stu Staton on this day. And I also pray for a peace for the family and friends that no person or pain can take away. The kind of peace that Jesus promised, a peace right in the midst of our pain. And each of us mourn in our own unique and special way. And we never know when the waves of grief will wash upon us. So I pray that the family would be kind to themselves. For grief can never, ever be wrapped up in a tidy fashion at the conclusion of a service, because that's just not how grief works in our world. So help us to remember Stu with fondness and appropriate in our lives the goodness that he reflected, because he truly lives on in our hearts and in our minds. And now let us join together saying the prayer that Jesus taught his followers to say, the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And at this time, as you are able, once again, I would invite you to stand, and we are going to read together the affirmation of faith, a new creed of the United Church of Canada. Please stand. And we are not alone. We live in God's world. We believe in God who has created and is creating, who has come in Jesus, the Word made flesh, to reconcile and make new, who works in us and others by the Spirit. We trust in God. We are called to be the church, to celebrate God's presence, to live with respect in creation, to love and serve others, to seek justice and resist evil, to proclaim Jesus, crucified and risen, our judge and our hope. In life, in death, in life beyond death, God is with us. We are not alone. Thanks be to God. And our concluding hymn, and I would invite you just to remain standing, is We Shall Go Out with Hope of Resurrection. The family told me that Stu enjoyed when the organ was played in a celebratory way, even with all the stops pulled. So I want to give Erwin permission to just send us out in this fashion to conclude Stu's service. Let's sing together. Got a little shiver up my spine as Erwin concluded that hymn of faith. Just remain standing for the benediction. Concluding the service today, the family does want to invite each and every one of you, if you are able to stay, to join them downstairs in the gymnasium for a luncheon that has been prepared to you by the members of the UCW. For those who may need to use an elevator is just located in this hallway, which will take you down to the gym level for the reception. Following the reception, I will be going with the family to Riverside Cemetery for the interment of ashes. So, loving and merciful God, support us throughout life's journey until the shadows lengthen and the evening comes and the busy world is hushed and the fever of life is over and our work is done. Then of your tender mercy, grant us a safe lodging and a holy rest and peace at last through Christ, our Redeemer. Amen. God bless each and every one of you.